We are gathered here today to talk about women and weight loss. So just like buckle in because there's gonna be a ride. What we're really talking about here is that your period, your menstrual cycle impacts the scales. That is like the one sentence summary of this video. And if you don't understand your period, you're gonna get really frustrated with weight loss because the scales reflect so much more than your body composition or the amount of weight that you're carrying or your body fat, okay, which is really what we want to understand. How much body fat do we have in ourselves? And we can use our body weight as a way to gauge whether it's increasing or decreasing, yeah? Okay, so you cannot talk about weight loss for women without understanding your menstrual cycle. And if you don't understand your menstrual cycle, you're gonna have a really hard time figuring out why your weight is changing so much. So if you've ever weighed yourself daily, there are daily fluctuations that just get wild, yeah? And here's why. So we have two phases in our period. We have our follicular phase, which is the first generally 2 weeks, and then we have our luteal phase, which again about 2 weeks, okay? So day one of your period, like day one when you start bleeding, that is day one of your follicular phase. That's day one of your cycle. From there, you have basically fairly steady, chilled out hormones up until your body's getting ready to ovulate. So up until the end of that 2 weeks. Then you have a surge in estrogen. And along with that is a surge in the luteinizing hormone. And that's what releases the egg. So that is ovulation. And if you are not having your period, or your period is consistently late, or you're on hormonal birth control, you're not ovulating, okay? That is why you do not get a period, because you are not ovulating. Your body isn't releasing the egg. So it's not producing enough estrogen in order to hit that threshold to release the egg. Or it's stressed the hell out, or you've got synthetic hormones and it's just shut down reproduction, okay? Which is a little bit scary in my opinion. Moving on, once you have ovulated, estrogen drops down a little bit and the follicle that's released the egg just restructures itself and starts like pumping out progesterone, which we love because we like progesterone a lot. And then what happens is both estrogen and progesterone rise and they hit their peak about 5 days out from your period, okay? So this is like the week prior to your period. And what do we all know happens in the week prior to our period? The whole world lights itself on fire. We experience mood swings, we have a whole lot of bloating, we might feel shitty in the gym. Sometimes we're just like less coordinated and it's hard to focus. We probably aren't sleeping as well. We're feeling really hot, we're waking up sweaty at night. Like there's just like this whole thing happening that happens every month that women deal with, and they generally tend to deal with it silently, or they don't realize that what they're suffering through and what they're dealing with shouldn't be happening. So the goal, the ideal menstrual cycle is to be virtually symptomless. And any symptoms that you are experiencing could be indicating some kind of underlying issue. There could be stuff going on. There could be some imbalance in your hormones. There could be too much of one thing. There could be too much stress. There could be not enough food. There could be an excess of training or whatever it may be. But just know that those symptoms are your body trying to talk to you. It is trying to communicate and it's trying to let you know that like it's not happy, it's not okay. So then once we've peaked, once estrogen and progesterone are like sky high, they actually drop down. And so by the time you begin your period, your hormones have settled again. So day one again of your period is actually, in terms of performance and training, or if you've got a race or a competition, that's actually advantageous for you to be on your period. The time that you don't really want to compete is the week prior when estrogen and progesterone are like, pew. So being on your period is actually not a bad thing. That can be really beneficial unless you're experiencing things like cramps or some other side effects, okay? But otherwise, in terms of hormones, like that's awesome. So with regards to weight, what happens? Now, with estrogen impacts fluid levels in the body. So what you'll see is when estrogen is high, we're probably going to be holding on to water. So you'll see your scales reflect that. So right around ovulation, you might see your scales jump up. Right before your period, you might see your scales jump up, and they might stay up, okay? You might even have the scales stay high from ovulation right through to when you end your period. So that's potentially 3 weeks. Then you might see the scales actually reflect more accurate number on the scales in the week after your period. And that might be the only week that you see an accurate number on the scales. So how do we deal with this? What do we do if we've got like all these things that are going to bring our weight up and down, and we might only have a small window where we actually see what our true weight is? Like, what do you do? Do we just fucking throw out our scales? Possibly. That's probably not a bad idea. But here's the thing. If the number on the scales freaks you out, you need to become curious about it. You need to learn to understand it. If you're just like blindly like, what the fuck, it didn't go down, oh my God, the world is ending, then you need to figure out why it's not going down. What could it possibly be reflecting? Number one, where are you on your cycle? Start tracking your weight against your cycle. So whatever day you're weighing yourself on, check what day in your cycle you're on. Even if your period is super irregular, even if you're on hormonal birth control, start putting it against your cycle, okay? Start observing the patterns, and you're gonna see over a couple of months, over 3, 4, 5 months, you're gonna have, on average, 500 periods in your life. So you're gonna have a lot of months that you can start comparing your weight to your cycle. Like literally, we bleed on average. This is so crazy. We bleed on average for 6 years. 6 years. That's how long we bleed. Yeah. So you're going to have a whole lot of time to figure out what your particular patterns are. Okay. So that's one way to start. When you weigh yourself, figure out what day of your cycle you're on. Okay. And start connecting those dots. Then the other thing is that there are so many variables when it comes to your weight. So if I had sushi yesterday and I had an increase in sodium because I had all the soy sauce, my weight's gonna be up. If I did a massive squat session or a whole lot of deadlifts or a big workout, my weight's probably gonna be up. If I ate dinner a little later than normal, my weight is probably gonna be up. If I woke up an hour or two earlier than I normally do and weighed myself, it's probably going to be up. There are so many things that cause an increase on the scale. It's not even funny. It's not. It's fucked up. It's really annoying. And when you start to understand that, you can start to get less angry with yourself because it's not your fault. Okay, if you're consistent with your diet or your deficit, if you're trying to lose weight and you're training consistently and you're doing all the right things, you didn't fuck up, okay? You are still being consistent, and that is the most important thing because the weight loss is going to be delayed, especially with your period. If you are building up to your period and you're not seeing the scales moving, don't get discouraged. Don't change anything. You just got to keep going. So what we have to start doing is this daily data that we're gathering. We can't change our behavior or our actions or our calorie intake or our training, whatever it is. We can't change those things based on the daily data. We have to become nerds and start getting weekly averages, okay? And what you do to find your weekly average is take your weight every day or every day where you can do it at a consistent time. Because remember, earlier in the day, you're gonna weigh more. So take it at a consistent time every morning. And then at the end of the week, it's really simple. If you've weighed yourself 7 times, add up every single day. You get a big number, and then divide that number by 7, and you will find your average weight. If that's way too confusing, go on a computer and look for an average calculator and just hit in those 7 weights, and it will just do the math for you. It's awesome. The computer, the internet is like amazing. So that is going to be what you start with. Find your weekly averages. Okay, so once you have a weekly average, you're actually going to have a better idea of what your true weight is. Then from there, you still can't even really get a hold of information or make any accurate conclusions from one weekly average. You have to compare week to week to week all of those averages to spot the trend. Because there will be a trend, there will be patterns, and you're going to see, hey, are you going down overall if you're in a deficit and you're trying to lose weight? Because if you are, you're doing the right thing. Good fucking job, champion. Or you might see and this is me, this is what happens to me every month. 3 weeks of nothing. 3 weeks of like, what's going on? I'm doing all the work, I'm putting in all the effort, I'm doing all the training, I'm eating all the right calories. And then 1 week of a whole lot of weight loss. So overall, my trend is still going in the direction that I want it to go in, but I just have 3 weeks of like nothing happening and then 1 week of everything happening, okay? So that is where you start to understand and see patterns, but it really is about looking overall long term, especially because we have a period once a month. So 1 month isn't going to actually tell you a whole lot. You need to kind of compare 3 months. You need to see what's happening in the bigger picture in order to see, hey, does my weight spike when I ovulate? Hey, when it spikes when I ovulate, does it drop down or does it stay high? Does it spike just before my period? Does it spike 1 week or 2 weeks before my period? How much will it drop after my period? Does it drop while I'm still on my period? Does it drop the week after? Do I have a significant drop there or can I drop steadily? Like weight loss is not linear. Weight loss is different for everybody. And you need to understand how to interpret the data, how to find what the trends are. And then you can change things like your calorie intake or maybe your training in order to adjust the output, right? Change the input in order to get the output that you want. So you need to understand your period. You need to find your weekly average and you need to look at the trends over a long period of time. So whatever you're doing, try not to change it, okay? And this is the hard part. When you're trying to interpret data, if you're constantly changing the input, the output is going to be affected. It's going to be impacted. So you need to almost keep your calories the same for 4 weeks at a time for the period of your period. And then after that, when you've been able to observe what the trend is, if it's going the way that you want, then you just keep doing that thing. If it's not going the way that you want, then that might be where you change the input in order to impact the output. Okay, so be a nerd with me. Start to gather the information and look at it over the big scheme of a couple of months and look at it in relation to where you're at with your period, okay? Because we have estrogen and progesterone to thank for a lot of things, including messing with the motherfucking scale. Peace.